and George Galloway. I will now hand over to Sukant Chandan, who will be discussing NATO allies and the Global South, an expansion of capitalism.
Thank you, Comrade Ramona. Thank you to the comrades here at ALBA Malta North African Coordination. It's a very nice name for our organization, and it's nice to have left a much colder island to come to a much warmer island, although there's some certain dynamics of connection between the British colonialists and imperialists and Malta, which is quite interesting. I've been tasked to speak for about 15-20 minutes on the subject that you've just heard. So, just by the by, you may not know where Chandigarh is. I was born in Chandigarh, which is it's the capital of the state of Indian Punjab in North India. And both my grandfathers fought the British colonialists in India. Indira Gandhi made my maternal grandfather a recognized freedom fighter, for which he was given some land. He was a poor peasant and illiterate, but he was recruited into the national struggle by Gandhi, and he joined the armed struggle shortly after that. He says, well, he's passed away now over 10 years ago, but when he used to visit, he used to speak in his very thick village dialect, which reminds me, if I'm speaking too fast or not clear enough, please just tell me to slow down and speak clearer. And I used to ask him, Nanaji, his grandfather, tell us about the national struggle. So he had said, you know, in the 20s I was recruited by Mahatma Gandhi, but then I soon realized the British were not going to listen just to the tactics of pacifist, peaceful struggle. So then I joined the armed struggle, inspired by freedom fighters like Shahid Azam Bhagat Singh, Shahid Udham Singh, and others. He says, yes, you know, I used to help blow up offices and trains and roads. He says, but you know, everyone was doing it then. So it was really wonderful, wonderful man. And then my father's father, he was a member of the Communist Party of India. And he was also active in Nairobi in Kenya, where my father was born. And my paternal grandfather helped to smuggle weapons from the Soviet Union to give to the Kenyan freedom fighters. And also he was a comrade of Jomo Kenyatta and of the Mau Mau, Dedan Kimathi and the Land and Freedom Party. So my history was written a long time ago. And so I often say, when people say, why did you come to India? I said, well, the British came to India first, we didn't come here. And when the British came to India, they emptied our country. This is undivided India, by the way, including Pakistan. And they emptied and looted India. And then my grandfathers fought the British. They chased the British out of India. And now my grandfathers have sent me to Britain to finish the job against British imperialism. So that's why I'm here in Britain. But to the subject at hand, so I think I'll start the 1930s and try to get through this as fast as I can, but not too fast. In the period post the First World War, it was a war between the leading colonial powers. Germany was jealous that France and Britain had so many colonies, and it had nearly none. So they went to war with each other to bicker over who has more colonies than the other. As a result, 1917, the Russian masses, led by Lenin and the Bolshevik Party, with the slogan, land, peace, and bread, decided to leave this imperialist war and to turn the imperialist war into a civil war for socialism, which they achieved. And the only other force in Europe that opposed the imperialist war in such a manner was the Irish. In Dublin in 1916, in Easter, it's the 100th centenary, just passed, we had a conference about this, they raised a revolutionary struggle. It's called the Easter Uprising. On the ashes of the First World War, the contradictions of imperialism, capitalist imperialism, was intensifying. I haven't got time to define Western capitalism and imperialism and all its complexities, so I'm going to have to leave that aside. but the contradictions were intensifying. Lenin and Stalin, well, Stalin, I suppose, summarized the teachings of Lenin and said there's three main contradictions of capitalist imperialism. One, between the imperialist countries themselves. Two, between the imperialist countries and the oppressed nations, meaning the so-called third world. We're not the third world. We were here before the first world. But anyway. And thirdly, between the imperialist ruling classes and their own domestic working classes. All these contradictions were intensifying. And by the 1930s, Germany felt, and they were right to feel, that they were put into a very subservient position as a result of the First World War. As the capitalist crisis erupted in the early 30s, in 1933, this exacerbated the contradictions further. The German working class wanted an answer out of their mess. And there was two options given to them that they had before then. One was the option of the fascist movement, led by Hitler and the so-called National Socialists. And the other alternative was that given by the Communist Party of Germany, of socialism. And in between this were the social-démocrats. And what happened was there was a very brutal street war, and many people don't know this actually. In the late 20s and 30s, the Communist Party of Germany had, I forgot the name, they were called the Red Front Fighters, or the Red Front Brigades. It was a militia of the Communist Party of Germany. And their task was to fight the brown shirts, which was just the thugs of the Nazis. Thousands of communists died in this street war. Thousands died in these years. And unfortunately, the communists were defeated as a result of the capitulation and the sellout nature of the Social Democratic Party. And the Social Democratic Party facilitated Hitler's rise to power. That's all historical fact. Then what happened, and there's lots of parallels to this to today in Europe. Lots of parallels, very similar parallels that are going on today. But the Soviet Union was there. Soviet Union was a big headache for imperialism. Massive, massive big headache. Soviet Union not only was exited out of the imperialist world economy, but it was assisting the colonies of the European imperialists to become free. Nightmare scenario for Britain, France, and the United States, particularly Britain and France. Lenin set up the university for the oppressed of the East. This was a university that he set up in the 1920s. The Communist International and Lenin said if the Western communists do not support by practical means the liberation struggle of the colonies against imperialism, they have no right to call themselves communists. Very clear, Lenin. There was no ambiguity whatsoever in what he said. But then Hitler's rise to power. Hitler represents a imperialist capitalist crisis. That's what a imperialism in deeper and deeper and deeper crisis. Same thing happening now with Trump, Nigel Farage, Marie Le Pen, Alternative for Germany, Swedish Democrats, Freedom Party in Austria. Same thing. It's a deepening crisis of this system. And so people, and we don't have a Soviet Union now. We don't have that. We don't have the type of radical consciousness we had then. So people aren't even interested. It's not even put forward to them, the alternative of anti-imperialism and socialism. What's put forward to them is racism, hatred towards migrants and refugees and immigrants, hatred towards particularly Islam and Muslims. They replaced the Jews of the 1930s in Europe. So Hitler he saw the Soviet Union as being the quote-unquote Jewish Bolshevik. He considered the German Communist Party to be run by Jewish Bolsheviks, which was actually it's a fascistic and racist mentality, but it's a little bit accurate as well, because Jews were the most oppressed people in Europe at the time, and the communists were the most radical liberators at the time. So he brought these two together in this conspiracy of the Jewish Bolshevik, right? And so he considered the Slavic people as well to be a subhuman race, right? So he took the colonial white supremacy, which Spain